Hello everybody here in London, and to all of you that are watching us online. Welcome to the third session of the Digital Classics Seminar 2025. Our speaker today is Thibault Clérice from the Centre Inria in Paris, and his topic is Distributed Text Services for Digital Classics. Do please feel free to leave comments or any questions in the chat, and we will get back to them during the question session after the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you for the committee for accepting my proposal for this seminar. It's with pleasure that I come back to London to talk about distributed text services, specifically so since my last presentation in London in the Digital Classics seminar was how did we fail about with captains and CTS in the world of digital classics? So hopefully I won't have to come back in 3 or 4 years or more to say, oh, to do an in memoriam of DTS. Just to give everyone credits, those slides are a mix and an update of a previous presentation for a workshop given at DH 2024, written by Hugh Calice, Jan Scott, Matteo Romanello, and myself. So today, I will try to present the history of DTS and where does it come from. And then we will have a very technical overview, and depending on the reaction in the room, I will go more or less into technical details. Then I will talk about tools, and we have an announcement at the end. So what does DTS come from? Well, actually, to understand DTS, you have to know about CTS, the Canonical Text Services. It's something that was mooted at a workshop at the Harvard Center for Hellenic Studies in 2003 by Neil Smith and Chris Blackwell. Basically, it took the model of TLG and PHI digital publication of the Greek and Latin classical canons, and it developed something to support the project of Homer multitext. It called it after the site architecture. The way it worked was with a system of identifier, this system based on URN specifically, which were able to reference authors, works, editions, but also inside the edition. So you will be able to reference passages, but even characters for the dreamed up specification of CTS. One of the other things that it did, it was to provide an ability to discover collection content. So it had a way, a little like OAI PMH for those who know it, a way to browse collection and to know what is in the text repository that was using canonical text services. UKLS say that the Homer multitext context is important. It was not born to be a standard, it was born to be used in the Homer multitext context. They used a citation scheme, something that was easy to use. And the issue, to some extent, is that the Perseus project took on the URN CTS system and then tried to, and when I say try, I'm including myself in it, tried to apply it to more stuff than what it was designed for. CTS was designed for Homer, and it worked very well for Homer. As soon as you will go a little outside of very classical text, it would you would find some difficulties to apply it. The way it was working is with this kind of syntax for the CTS identifier. You would have a CTS namespace and then the work, and the work could be split into 4 different parts. Most of the implementation will not have the exemplar part, which, as far as I know, was only used in the Homer multitext project. It was only URN by name. That's not very important, but I think it shows why the Homer multitext context is important. It was never registered at the URN as a URN namespace. It isn't centralized like the URNs, and so it's not official URN. It's just URN by syntax. Just some example. I'm not gonna spend too much on it, but basically the way it worked was in the identifier was you could have all the information you needed, and it was decoupled from the application to some extent. If you wanted to say, I want line 1 of song 1 of Virgil, you could say that with only an identifier, sorry, and without any URL specifically. You could just refer to the identifier. And so why did DTS start to become a necessity, or why did something else in CTS start to become a necessity? It's because CTS first was designed as an XML RPC style web service. So basically an old way of doing things to simplify things. And the text inventory that I talked about before was designed for small text repositories. The way it was built is everything should be transmitted when someone wanted the repository's catalog, which means it was fine when you had 10, 100, or even 1,000 texts. As soon as you start to be like papyri.info and you have 80,000 texts, it's completely impossible to do it, or you're going to send like megs or even maybe gigs of data at once. As I say, the canonical frame doesn't work so well when you're dealing with text without a standard referencing system. And the way the URN was built, so the identifier, will make it so that even in Perseus, sometimes when we had to find an identifier for text, which were from anonymous authors, you had to invent anonymous text group. And one example that I like is I worked a lot on the Priapea in Latin, and the text group is Priapea. The work is Priapea, and the edition is Priapea edited by. And at some point, one of the two first level is completely superfluous. You don't need this kind of details, and you have to make up stuff like that so that you comply with the specification. And lastly, and I think it was important, it was more of a project than a standard. And what I mean by that is the way standard is built, it's built democratically. There is a room for feedback, and there's a room for shared decision. CTS, because it was so central in Homer multitext, didn't have room as much as standards should have to evolve based on feedback, basically. So when we started to think about DTS, we thought it needs to be backwards compatible to some extent, and it needs to answer to the same kind of issues, basically being able to discover capability, discover like all collections are built in your text repositories. It should bring back or keep rather what was the innovation in CTS, I think, which was a way to refer to specific range of text and only get this part of the text. And this is, to me, what's most important in CTS and also to some extent in DTS is that you are able to say, I want line 1 from song 1 to line 5 to song of song 1 from the Aeneid, and you're able to show this passage very easily, which means that in a perfect world where DTS or CTS gets very big, you could have stuff like JSTOR or per se in France, and someone is mentioning a text, and by the power of AI first to annotate the text, and by the power of DTS or CTS to retrieve the text, you could not have to go to the library to find the book, or you wouldn't have to go to Perseus or whatever else to find the text. You could just simply over the text, and the text will appear. The reference, sorry, and the text will appear. And of course, DTS wanted to be a little more flexible and democratic in the sense of shared decision, so less project-centric, and updated technologies so that it could be a more followable standard. It's been 10 years since the first meeting, and basically it happened first as a workshop. I have a fuzzy memory of this workshop because I couldn't go to Boston, so I did it from France with a 6 hours time difference. So it was not probably the funniest workshop I have ever been to, or I've participated in. Sorry. And Bridget Elmas and Chris Black will organize that. And at the end of the meeting, sorry, you joined the meeting. I didn't remember that he was not invited originally before I read the slides. And Bridget Elmas started to, around the group, we started to have meetings to create an alternative to CTS. We have meetings monthly, more or less. And then 2017, Jonathan Roby joins us and basically takes the chair. Jonathan Roby has worked on, I never remember, but I think it's the XQuery specification. And he is interested in biblical studies, so it was a good fit. We had a mini grant and a workshop at Duke in 2018. And from 2018 to 2024, basically we have monthly meetings being from 1 hour to 3 hours, depending on how much energy we had left, depending on the year. We had some events. In 2019, we presented the first version. I think I have a slide about that after, no? And we really had the first version of DTS that we were happy to share with people. It was definitely not final. In 2021, I think that was very important with Hugh and Jonathan. We brought the citation structures element to TEI, which citation structure are elements that you can put in TEI to describe how your text should be chunked in a table of content. And it can do it programmatically. It's basically a solution to, if you know the node, refsdecal and cref pattern specifically. And cref pattern is a nightmare to work with or to encode because it's not clear how it works. And site structure basically clears that up. Then we have an online hackathon, and honestly, between 2002 and 2022 and 2023, we start to be quite exhausted. And at some point, we say maybe we should just see each other in person. Bridget has left the group because she went into to have another job, so it was only you, Jonathan, Jan, and myself. And we weren't able to put the time, I have to say, for 2 years. And then we meet at Duke, and basically we are 3 days in a basement room without light of the day, and we go over the whole specification, clean everything up, have heated debate on some stuff, are very happy on the agreement that we find at the end, and we release 1.0 alpha. So that's the picture after 3 days of being in the same quarters. We didn't kill each other's, but for sure it was some experience. It was cold because it was in March. I just want to remind that we had at least 4 major contributors that have left since DTS, but Jeffrey Seaweed, who was one of the first in the group that Bridget Elmas created, Bridget, of course, and then people who were never in the technical committee, but we have granted them the title of DTS ambassadors because they were going everywhere to sell DTS to people, but they didn't want to suffer through the technical meetings, basically. So that's the story, and I hope you have an idea of how long it was, but also how bumpy the adventure was. And so let's see what DTS is in detail. DTS is a way to share collections of text, but it's not only the text, but also all the metadata on top of it. So you have a way to organize your collections. And collection is basically whatever you want. It can be the name of a collection can be an author's life work, or it can be a topic. It can be whatever you need it to be, basically. And you can have any kind of depth of details in your collection, it's not important to DTS. We do not say anything about how your collection should be, except for a very simple fact. Maybe not that simple. It should be non-cyclic directed graph. What it means, just in case, it means like it's a tree, and objects can be children of the same thing, but a parent should never be a children of its own parent. You cannot have a loop, basically. And it's a way to, it needs to provide a way to discover a collection structure, to see how text can be cited, and most importantly, it's a way to make sharing text, but also chunks of text much more easily on the web. 3 use cases. In a perfect world, DTS will be able to be used through a standard reader client to explore any text or collections. Obviously, we know it's not true with TEI, but there could be ways to ease that, definitely. In a perfect world, you could also have a main, you could have centralizing fake DTS API, so DTS API that connects to other DTS APIs. And so this way you could browse all the DTS APIs in the world and probably find what you're interested in. And finally, depending on what you're doing, but for me, it's an important thing, ingest text for data processing. I don't want to have to find where to download your files. I can just request exactly what I need from your API. A bit of vocabulary for DTS. We have 4 terms that I'm going to use very often: resource, collection, and citable unit, and citation tree. A resource is basically a text document. It can have metadata, and it is both the metadata of the text document and its content. A collection is a named aggregation of digital resources or other collections. So basically, it's a node that is only made of metadata. You don't have text in it. And a citable unit is a portion of a resource identified by a string. So 1.1 for song 1, line 1 of ZN8, for example. And a citation tree is a tree of reference labels corresponding to the hierarchical structure of a resource. So this is something new compared to CTS. In CTS, you assume there is only one citation tree. You have book lines, for example. In DTS, we allowed to have more than one. So you could have book lines in the sense of the classical way of citing virtual, but maybe you want to also, you're dealing with OCR, for example, and you want to be able for people to go back to the printed version to correct the OCR. And you could have another citation tree that uses pages of the printed book. And so you can go back to the original material very easily. Of course, you have also the situation where you have competing citation schemes for certain type of works. And you would also be able to accommodate to that with a different citation tree. This is how collection works. This is an example where you have a big collection, which is classic English novel, and then you have Victorian novel, horror novels. So 2 collections under classic English novels. And horror novels has also 2 different collections in it, 19th century and 20th century. You can see that you can have resources, so text that you can read anywhere you want, including at the top collection. And some text can be found in multiple collections. It's still the same text, it's just findable in different collections. As for citation tree, this basically looks like that. So that would be a very simple citation tree where you have chapter and paragraphs. So now the DTS API is structured This way we have, it's basically what I call endpoint is sub APIs, right? So it's broken in 4 parts. Sorry. The entry point, very simple. It's the entry point. That's where you go and you have information about the API. It basically brings you to the other endpoints if you didn't come from somewhere else. So if someone tells you, here is my DTS API, you will end up on the entry endpoint. If you come from finding a URI of the DTS API, probably you will already be on another endpoint, basically. Then you have the collection API, which is basically the catalog browser. If I simplify things, you have the navigation APIs. So when you find a resource in the collection API, you can do 2 things with it. You can go to the document API and tell, give me the full document, and it will print you the full TI or the full HTML, depending on what kind of document you have. Or you can say, show me the navigation endpoint for this document. And this will tell you how the document is structured, what kind of node you can cite. So for example, again, for the init, you will have all the books listed, all the lines listed, and you can filter that out dynamically by saying, I want only the lines in book 1, for example, and it will list you the book in the lines in book 1. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the entry point. It's basically your entry door. And the only thing that is important is that it tells you which DTS version your DTS API is using. And we built DTS. I didn't say that until now, sorry. We built DTS so that you can, there are 2 ways to accommodate with DTS, do conformance level. I think it's level 0 and level 1, but maybe I'm wrong on the naming scheme. And one of those levels allows the API to be a static website. So you could generate your full DTS API static version, leave it aside, and there is only one thing that is not available in the static website, which is range citations. And it's fairly easy to explain why. But the DTS API the DTS entry point will tell you this is conformance level 1 or 0, for example. And finally, DTS doesn't care about how you build your URIs. If you're using /DTS or DTS.html, it's up to you. The way DTS is built is you can have any kind of URL templates. So this is what it looks like. And when I say any way to build URI, it really is any way, because basically this tells you like, this is the root of the collection entry endpoint, and this is how you will use your parameter. This is a standard. It's an RFC something is available on the website. And so you have a lot of software that helps you like build this kind of templates, and a lot of software that helps you consume these kind of templates. Collection endpoint, more interesting than the entry point. Role expose the structure of collection and expose metadata about the collection and its sub-collections. I already talked about the structure, but it's basically unidirectional, and you can have a resource in multiple collection. You can have collection in multiple collection as well, right? A resource is just a specific case of a collection because it is readable. This is what URIs could look like. Sorry, I'm gonna leave it a little longer, but it's not very important, right? Basically, the top collection doesn't have an ID, and all other collections have IDs. And this is not perfect example because technically your IDs should be URIs, and those strings are not. They are URIs, but not good URIs, right? So the collection endpoint is JSON LD. but the whole DTS API has been redesigned so that we provide I think it's context or vocabulary, I never remember, so that people can consume DTS without caring about JSON LD. Because to be frank, in 2025, I'm sorry if someone is fan of triples and stuff like that, but I think we can say that we have lost this battle to some extent. And triple stores is definitely not Web 3.0 like we expected 10 years ago. We still comply with JSON LD because we still believe that some people like it, but we also try to hide it so that normal developers, not library developers or humanities developers, can use it without having to deal with prefix and namespaces and stuff like that. I hope I didn't hurt anyone's feelings. And a collection is basically defined by an ID, a title, and the number of parents and children it has. That's the basic thing that you must have. All other things that you can see in must include are things more related to how you're going to navigate in the API. It may include a member list of children or parents, depending on if you're browsing top down or bottom up. If the object is a resource, it will also bring you links to navigation and document endpoints. This is what it looks like. So partially because otherwise I don't have enough space on my slide. You have the idea of the collection. It's a ID general, so it's a root API. It has 8 children's. The title is Classic English Novels, and you can see one of the children just here that has 1 parent. Children's of collections are collections themselves. So basically, you can you can expect the same thing up and down. One thing here, because we have the collection link that is repeated here and there, it means also that you can connect to another DTS APIs, as I said before. Here, if our novels were hosted not by example.org but example.fr, then it will work as well. But of course, because we're in the world of humanities and libraries and GLAMs in general, you can put much more into the description of your collection or your resource. You can have a free text description, which is always kind of nice to have, but you can also have Dublin course terms, definition of your document, and you can also use any other namespace that you want. There is a special space in the collection template where you can use any namespace you want, and it's project specific, so people do not need to be able to be aware about it. But you have also the Dublin core part where people normally knows what to do with Dublin core, basically. Additionally, you will have a download URI for resources. It's completely optional. Site structure, if your resource has one, it's not just one chunk of text and you want to be able to cite parts, other chunks of text, you will need to tell what is a citation tree, basically. And you can also provide media types. So basically, in which format your resource can be read. And you can use HTML, XML, whatever you want. It's quite free. So this is how it will look like for the Dublin core part and the description. So you can basically use Dublin core terms, sorry, to be very specific. And you could have media types. So what I know with this is that this resource, this is a resource. This is a very bad example, but anyway, I should be able to read it both in TEI-XML and text HTML, sorry. And this is a citation tree. So this is a very simple citation tree. because you have only one, basically. As you see, it's citation trees, and then you have one citation tree, which is structured with poem and line. You can have multiple systems in a site structure. So, for example, you could have poem, line, and paragraphs if you have introduction to your poems, for example, or date or signatures or something that is important in your data. You don't need to have only lines under your level. Yeah.
Can you have overlapping citation structures in the same?
In the same tree, no. In different trees, yes. That's the point of the different trees. Typically, like poem, lines, and pages, you will be overlapping normally, but not in the same tree. It felt like a nightmare to have to handle. And this is how another one would look like. The first citation tree that is provided is expected to be the default one. So poems will be used by default when you don't specify the tree that you want to use. And if you want to use pages, you will have to say citation tree equal pages. The navigation endpoint is basically, I don't like table of content because table of content normally is curated. So it's an uncurated table of contents, basically. One thing that is important is that the navigation endpoint and the citable unit can have their own metadata. So if you think about a correspondence or a personal diary, yeah, you will be able to say, okay, entry 1, for example, metadata, date, place of writing, and stuff like that. You can add metadata also at the level of the navigation endpoint. Why we did that is, first, people wanted that, but one of the issue with TI, and that's one of the issue and its strengths, is that you can really encode that any way you want. And you need to go into the TI to know, how did people encode this kind of metadata? But then if you give a way to provide that in the navigation endpoint, it's a standardized way to know the metadata about the chunks that you're providing. And so that's one way of saying you don't need to parse the TI. You can show the TI, but you don't need to parse the TI to know about metadata about the nodes that you're parsing. And navigation can deal both with single references. I want everything in book 1, or ranges. I want everything between book 1 and book 3, for example. Just a reminder, this is the level of conformance difference. A static website cannot deal with ranges because you will have a number of combinations that is more or less not infinite per se, but very, very, very big. So how is the response built? You have this kind of citation tree. The way the navigation endpoint will give you back the tree is it will give it back to you in document reading order. So if you ask, you have the ability to say, I want level 1 and level 2, for example, or down to level 2. So I want every chapter reference and every paragraph reference. Instead of giving you all the chapter and then all the paragraph, it will give you chapter 1, paragraph 1 of chapter 1, paragraph 2 of chapter 1, etc., etc., chapter 2, paragraph 1 of chapter 2, etc., etc. So very important warning, because it's a decision. It's not very important. It's not very complicated per se, but it's something that is important to know when you're dealing with the DTS API. Some examples. This looks like that. So you have metadata about your resources that are given back here, including like what are your citation trees, And then you have one citable unit here. So identifier is C1. It's the first level of the citation tree, and it doesn't have a parent, or rather its parent is the root, and root has the identifier null. And it's a chapter. If I go down to level 2, I will have something that looks like that. I have not included example with metadata, but saying that it's basically the same as before for collection. You can have duplicate core and extensions. There is not enough screen space for complete example. And then you have ranges, which does the same thing as before, but between two milestones. Check the time. Document endpoint. Document endpoint is pretty straightforward. Before, DTS was designed with only TEI-XML. Sorry, what's the best of must? It's must. Yeah. Okay. So you must, but in the past. You should have. You should have. You should have TEI-XML output for the document. We lightened the restriction to you should have, you may have, you're encouraged to have TEI-XML as your default output format. The reason we did this change is in the hope that maybe people in other industries will be interested in sharing like PDFs or HTML, but are not caring at all about the TEI part of the API. And because it will only change the way you deal with the document endpoint, everyone could profit from the collection, the navigation, and the entry endpoint code, basically of other participants of the users of DTS. One thing that it does, because it's TEI or it's HTML, there is no real way to know, like, how do I go to the next passage or how do I go to the previous passage, is we recommend, sorry, that's another difference with the level 1 of conformance, because static website can't have that. We recommend to have link headers to say, here is the link to the collection, here is the link to the next passage, to the previous passage, etc., etc. So here are 3 examples of URIs, not very, very interesting, but just so that you can see. And you can specify, like in navigation, a different citation scheme. So citation tree, basically, if you see resource Dracula, 3 pages, and so you will be asking for page 5, basically. If the and you can require a different media type. Here, from the point of view of HTTP, it's not perfect, because normally you request media types through headers, but because we support static website, the only way for static website to expose as other media types is through URIs, and so headers would not fit this requirement. Okay. We have seen all about the way DTS works. There is a full website with a lot of examples and a lot of typos. So if you see them, open an issue. For some reason, everyone thought it was the best idea for the French guy in the team, the only non-English native speaker, to write the specifications. And so there is definitely grammar in English issue here and there. There are tools that have been built over the years, and some people have trusted us for a long time regarding this. There are at least 2 what we would call client-side implementations, the DTS aggregator and something called .vue. I don't think .vue is public yet. I know it exists, and I will talk about it a little. And then you have a few API implementation. that I will talk about some of them. The implementation of the UNIL is not public yet. The implementation of the King's Digital Lab, I think, is public, but I don't think it's updated to the latest version of the standard. And the XDB TI publisher implementation is definitely not up to date with the standard. But there is a grant in France called a project in France called Biblissima, who is going to fund upgrading the model. And I thought I removed the last sentence because that's not true. So don't mind the last sentence. So what is DTS aggregator? It was built by Matteo Romanello, and it's basically a client-side project that aims at demonstrating the distributed side of DTS. You register DTS APIs in some kind of meta collection, and it presents to you a normal DTS API, and you will be able to browse to any kind of other API around the world. And so this gives you the ability to find text from classical studies to what the École Nationale des Chartes is doing in France, or to epigraphy or DraCor, basically. At some point, I know the DTS aggregator wants to include search capacities so that you are able to not browse every API to find what you're interested in, but you are able to search. But search is not part of DTS specification, because first we needed something that would work before having to suffer more through specification building. Dots Vue and Dots are basically two projects built at the École Nationale des Chartes. Dots without Vue after is a backend solution, so a server-side, a server implementation using xquery and basics, and it's valid with the latest version of DTS. The only difference, the only limitation, it's a pretty generic implementation. It should work with most of the text, stressing most, because it uses site structures to build the navigation and the chunking of citable unit, but it only allows for containing nodes, so by epigraphy, and only if you're using position or XML IDs. We have a discussion with the developer, and maybe one day it will move past this limitation, but for now, this is where it is. And it's fairly well documented. And Dots Vue is a client-side implementation to navigate in a DTS API. I have not seen it in running yet, but I know they have been working on it for a long time. And the code source, I think it's public, but I don't think there is huge documentation on how to use it. You have DraCor, and DraCor has had a DTS API for many years now, and they updated to the latest version earlier this year. And it's built upon XDB, but it's not generic. It's fit for DraCor, it's fitted for DraCor corpus, and it won't work on anyone else's corpus, basically. Still, it provides 3,700 plays in a DTS API with all the metadata that you can expect. Matteo Romanello worked on this, and it was so important for us. It's a DTS validator, so if you build a DTS API, you are now able, since last fall, to validate your implementation to check that it's up to the standard. And it was also used by us to check that our documentation was up to our own standard, because sometimes you write typos in example, or you forget to update an example. And it's one way to deal with that. The way it was built is it's possible to use, I put work in progress and after reading. Anyway, it's ready to use. It's up to date with the unstable version of DTS. And it's also ready for continuous integration and continuous development. So if you are building a DTS API and you want to run tests on it, every time you do a commit, you can use a DTS validator on it, which is a huge thing, I think, for DTS. But it can also be used to test remote DTS API. So if someone comes to us and doesn't know to run DTS validator, we can run it against the API and tell them you have an issue here, here, and here. This is what you should change. And Matteo wanted to do validation of JSON LDR via shackle shapes. I don't know what this means. I think I remember it was a headache, and I have not heard of it since. Maybe it did it, maybe it didn't. And finally, I think that was the update that I wanted to provide, and nearly on time, is my DAPI-10s. So DAPI-10s is a complete implementation of the distributed text services, up to date normally. It can be used either as a web app to serve your data, or as a way to generate a static DTS API, as it's also a way to parse catalogs and parse text. So right now there is not the script to generate the static files, but it's not only a web app. It has all the tools to parse a collection of text. It allows, as far as I know, it's the only implementation of DTS or site structure that allows for mapping to at least one level of milestone type nodes since last October or November, something like that. So basically, it enables working with epigraphic and papyrological corpora. Sorry, no, since March. And in general, it also allows for document-oriented citation trees. So anything with pages or folios, for example. I said one because I have not tested two. And I'm very afraid of saying that two doesn't work. And then I would feel compelled to make it work. And I don't want to deal with that right now. But for one level, it works. It's written in Python, but the code, all the code is built using XPath selection, and there is some code using XQuery, but it's only because the Saxon Python implementation does very weird thing with spacing, so I had to do some XQuery to deal with that. And so I think it's fairly easy for someone who knows Python and who knows another language to port the code to the other language and do something much better in Java or in maybe even in full XQuery. It's lightweight, unlike MyCaptain. So MyCaptain was the thing I said we failed a few years ago at Digital Classicist seminar. It's only focused on getting the data in and out. It doesn't do anything fancy. It doesn't try to do triple store at the same time. It passes TI file with site structure, and it gives you a web app. And for the sake of some kind of performance, all the metadata are passed at the beginning when you generate your web app and stored in an SQLite database so that it's very fast when you're browsing the catalog. And we have updated hook test. So for those who don't know hook test, and I'm pretty sure probably most of the people here don't know hook test, site structure or rev table are very nice in principle. You can say, here is the level 1 of my citation tree, and you find this at this XPath. But to validate this, you cannot use XML schemas because, well, you can say, okay, it has the right attribute and it has the right name and it's in the right place. But to really validate it, you will need to run the XPath and check that every node works according to this XPath, and you don't have two nodes that have the same XPath, for example, and that are in different parts of the document. So basically, to validate the way you describe your citation tree, the only way to do that is to actually compute the citation tree, which XML schema is not able to do. And so hook test is basically that. It was basically that for RefDeco, and it's an update to this using DAPI10s in the back end to validate your site structure TI elements. And if you're using DAPI10s, it also allows you to validate repositories. So with catalog metadata. The way I have always built apps is you have an XML file that stores metadatas outside of the TI. So that if you have different projects that use little different TI, you don't have to worry about working with this TI. You generate the catalog metadata, and then you pass those catalog metadata. And it provides a clear report. I will show you example after. And an announcement. Today, after 1 hour exchange of mail yesterday, I just asked, when are we doing that? And the team was just like, tomorrow. Distributed text services reaches its version 1 release candidate. What does it mean is that we set 3 months for anyone to comment, find bugs, report those bugs. If there are no updates to the DTS or no bugs reported in 3 months, it will be version 1. And we are free. So you have until October 10th, 2025 to find any bugs. Typos do not count as bugs, but you can find them whenever you want. And if you have projects that are interested in DTS, feel free to test it. And I will do demo very quickly, maybe. Okay, I'm just gonna do a demo of hook test. I have already examples. So I tried to play with the Biblissima that I don't know. You need to tell me more about it. But basically, I opened your XML file that you sent me a few months ago, Gabby. And the only thing I did was add RefDeco. That's the only thing that hook test needs, right? And so I said, I have updated that since then. So I'm going to change that because I missed something. Sorry. This way. So I saw that the document had LBs. I thought first it was LB and I just read too fast. And then you have translations, right? The way I built the system is the default citation tree will retrieve lines in the edition, and the secondary citation tree will retrieve translation in the language you want. And technically, you could also, because the Italian translation, I think, uses the same lines, you could also say, here is line 1 of the in the document of the Italian translation. So I just added that. Took me less than a minute, I think, and then I can test. And what does it tell me? I'm gonna zoom maybe a little. What do I zoom in that? Okay. What does it tell me? Biblissima. It can parse it. It has found 2 trees. The first tree is the default one. It found 15 lines. The second one is translation. It found 3 languages, 5 blocks, paragraph, etc., etc., and 12 lines. And only the Italian translation has lines. Does it add forbidden refs? So things that are forbidden in terms of naming schemes? No. Does it add duplicate ref? If those 1.1 in any of the trees find 2 different things? No. And it does that for both trees. And if you do it on something that doesn't work, and I'm going to also do the metadata report. you will have stuff. Oh, okay. Sorry. You will have stuff like this. Reference at following XPath are found more than once. So 12, div and 12 is found twice. Shouldn't be possible. And here, same thing. Your unit uses section and fragment. This is not allowed for some reason. I don't remember which right now, but and yeah, so I remember what is forbidden. Inside structure, you can define delimiters to join levels together. If you have in your reference the same thing that you use in your delimiter, then you don't know to delimit things anymore. So what it says here is be careful. At this XPath, you have a reference which is 1.1, but your delim is actually 1. So you will encounter issues when parsing the thing. And then I put your Biblissima document into the Dapitens app. And this is how it will look like. So I go, sorry, a bit better, yeah. So I go to the collection. I have Julia Biblissima epigram 1. I have put some metadata, a description. I have used Pleiades for the spatial coverage and contributor Gabriel Bollard, which because you're not the author. And then I can go, if I want the full document, I can click on the document API. Of course, DTS is not meant to be browsed by humans, right? But by machine. But just to show you that you can click and a software program will do the same thing, basically. And the navigation. So I'm going to say down equal -1. So all the nodes up to the bottom of the tree. I am on the default tree, so I will only find the lines. And then if I do tree equal translations, I think I put an S, yeah. I have English, French, Italian translation, and then I have lines in the Italian translation. And if I want the text, and I found a bug, so I'm going to show the answer, the response that doesn't bug, which I think is this one. Yeah. So the current version of Dapitens doesn't put back the TI header. I need to fix that. But I asked from, you didn't see maybe in the URI, but I asked Biblissima file, and then I say from 4 to 5, and I get from 4 to 5. And maybe a little more here. Oh yeah, because I have an issue. Yeah, because of the I found a bug with the Italian translation. Anyway, thank you for this file, which found me a bug that I really didn't want to find. But basically, it works as long as you don't find a new bug. So this is the end, I think, for the presentation. But just to show you that it works.
Thank you.
We've been waiting for this.
Me too.
It's very much what we want. When we were doing in Ancient Wisdoms, this is exactly what we were playing with CTS as much as we could.
Yeah. I remember Ancient Wisdoms.
Now it means a complete conversion.
It's
DTS.
I think we took way more time than we would have wanted. But I think the final result is much stronger than what we had originally. If I compare like 2025 version to 2019 version, which was the very first public release, it's much cleaner and simpler to understand as well, I think.
So shall we say thank you again and take any questions first from the room here, from those present? Or comments for that matter?
It's been a long hour. I won't take it badly if there is no questions.
Nobody has one here. I have a very minor question. I remember you were saying that you encouraged TEI-XML as output because you would like to also draw in sharing from other institutions or industries. And I was just curious what sort of industries you envisaged there.
Okay, I might have misexpressed myself. Before you had to have TEI-XML, that was a requirement, it was a default format. And basically we moved to, you are encouraged to have TEI in the hope that industries that do not produce TEI, but HTML or PDF, would adopt DTS, and we could still share all the other chunk of code, basically. So we are not expecting industries to adopt TEI, at least not industries outside of academic industries who exists. But yeah.
I have 100 technical questions about no interest in how to discuss those offline.
You have the code. It was a nightmare to implement. It was a nightmare to implement, but and apparently there is still one bug that is left to deal with. But I really think that the way I did, if you remove the query, which really is only there to deal with weird Saxon's way of dealing with spacing in reconstructing the document, because what I do in DEPI-10s, so it's not DTS specific, right? It's DEPI-10s. I reconstruct the document node by node using the request, and you could do that with XSLTs most probably, but I'm not well versed enough in XSLT to do that. And I think one way to replicate what I did is probably to build dynamic XSLT style sheets based on a request. And I think that will do the trick. I just didn't go this way for that. And for LBs, basically what I do is find the node where it is, everything that is before, ignore it, and everything that is after it, take it into account until you meet the next node that is in the citation tree. Because we know basically that the next LB with an N is part of the citation tree. And this way you can actually get the range and you create an encapsulation of the thing. And then there is a lot of technical details, right? But the idea is, you know the citation tree, so you know when you need to stop technically. If you are line number 4, you know you need to end at line number 5. So until you have found the doc, you take the beginning, you take the node with the tree with line 4, the tree with line 5, and you only text what is in between, which is not fun, but works.
Presumably all these decisions you're talking about are things that we would have to document in a part of the head of the citation scheme documentation. So when you say, so I mean, there's all these tiny little things that there are assumptions that I'm not sure we always explain very well, and therefore may not be true. So when you just said the next LB that has an N, I'm now suddenly thinking, what about all the LBs that don't have N's that people put in for various reasons? Do we need to document that? Or, you know.
Yeah, citation structure. I think citations. Site structure. Site structure is a node in TI that we brought that I think pushes people to rethink the way they encode, so that the encoding of the structure they are imagining for the document is self-expressed by said document, self-documented at least. And all those decisions to put and or not ands, etc., they have a meaning, most probably. Forcing yourself to put this into a site structure, even if right now it's not possible, I think is a way to tell people this is how I imagine the uncreated table of content of my document. And this is how you should go into it, basically. One thing that I don't like, it's possible with dependence, is positions. I prefer when people do things expressively, probably not the right word. Explicitly, thank you. And I know this word. Explicitly, so a lot of times in poems or a lot of people who want numbers or lines, they will just say like L. And the issue with that, specifically with site structure, is then if you forgot a line, then you're shifting everything else, right? And this is done dynamically to some extent. And if you want to have two lines shifted because in the end, in your edition, you think that line 4 and line 5 should go line 5 and line 4, then you cannot do that. So although it's not forced upon anyone in terms of radical site structure or dependence, this is something that I think is not very solid in terms of self-documentation. So @n is the best way to do it. The issue with @XMLID is that it has a lot of forbidden characters.
Can you use slightly deeper levels of expand in those definitions? So, for example,
in position,
we say the citation structure is just LBs that have an @n whose content is an integer. Or we don't need with an XPath to define the content.
I think you could, if you can express it in an XPath in match.
Yeah, with a regex. Yeah.
Then it should work. But you need to be, basically you need to be, can you show the screen?
Oh, yeah.
I guess that if you put something like @n is an int in a way that is correct in XPath, obviously, it should work. At least, like, this is a valid site structure declaration. Does it work in dependence? I don't know because I have not tested. But I think I have tested with something like type equals something. So I wouldn't be surprised if it would work otherwise.
Cool. Now this is great because this then if we start by default having this sort of recital in these files, this causes us to be more deliberate in our use of encoding, which is.
And I didn't show it, but actually you also have site data that exists, which allows you to say, for example, I don't remember exactly how it's built, but let's say it's match head, and you have something like property equal type DC title, and you can also like define what kind of metadata goes with your citable nodes. It's a little more complicated with LBs because they are not self-containing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it works currently in dependence because it's complicated to do an XPath that works this way. But it works for containing nodes. And it's, again, even if it doesn't work in dependence, you can still define your site data for content, which is cool.
Any comments or queries from the room?
several things that I flagged that I was going to ask questions about, but then within a minute you'd explain.
Good. It means the presentation is not bad, or not completely bad. Okay. Either way, the documentation is online. There is a lot of example. I think the documentation is probably like 90% example and 10% documentation, like written documentation. And the code of all the things that I shared is online. And I will put my slides on my university repository if you want to look back at them without the video, if you don't want to hear my voice. Yeah.
So, thank you everyone for joining in this session of the Digital Classics Seminar 2025. I'd just like to remind everybody that the next session is on July 18th, same time, same place. And our speaker will be Esther Salgarella from the University of Aarhus. And her title is Sort It, See It, Say It, Digital Strategies to Revive a Bronze Age Aegean Script. So please do join us here in person or online, and thank you and goodbye from London.